U.S. Navy history arriving. Welcome back to the U.S. Navy History Podcast. I am Dale, and over there is Steven, the XO. Hi, Steven.
Hey there, everyone. How's it going this week?
So today, we are touching on the United States Exploring Expedition. This happened between 1838 to 1842.
I thought these were supposed to be 5-year missions going to parts unknown, seeking out new life and new civilizations. Why'd they call it short after a year?
Because they ran out of gas.
This is the era of sail. I'm not going to accept that one.
Well, sorry, Kirk. So are you ready to get underway?
Let's cast off.
So this was a survey expedition of the Pacific Ocean and surrounding lands, which was conducted by the United States. The original appointed commanding officer was Commodore Thomas Ap Cosby Jones, and the voyage was authorized by Congress in 1836. Sometimes they will call this the USXX for short, or the Wilkes Expedition. In honor of the CEO appointed after Jones, Lieutenant Charles Wilkes. Now, the reason of this expedition was the importance of growth of science in the U.S., in particular, the field of oceanography.
So, this wasn't the United States trying to preemptively get more information on the, Pacific layout because they were intending on westward expansion because California became a state in 44? 49? Something like that? Because I know the United States was eyeing up, all the way to the Pacific from as soon as westward expansion started kicking off. This was, on paper, launched because, hey, we actually want to explore and expand our knowledge.
So California officially became a state in 1850.
Okay.
But yes, this is about science. So Congress gave President John Quincy Adams a little prod in 1828 because they wanted to send an expedition around the world. They understood that this would be a great benefit to the country by promoting commerce and to offer protection to the whaling and seal hunting industries. Mostly in the Pacific Ocean.
So at this time, those international voyages weren't just military flexes. Like, it actually had commercial value as well, just to show how wide-reaching and strong the nation was as a trade partner.
Right. Congress was like, we're going to use public ships for this. But at the time, the only ships owned by the government capable of circumnavigating the world were Navy ships.
Okay.
So Congress decided that it be a naval expedition.
Rather than, government-owned, but civilian in the equivalence of technology and whatever gear they would be using.
No, government-owned, government people. Just it wasn't supposed to be military at first.
Okay.
So the sloop of war, your favorite one, the Peacock,
Yes!
was decommissioned and broke in 1827.
Why would you build me up just to tear me down like this?
It was then rebuilt in 1828 and was intended as a exploration ship.
She lives!
And rechristened her the USS Peacock once again.
Huzzah!
So the funny thing is that funding was not authorized until 1836.
For the Peacock to be recommissioned?
For this whole project.
So were they just handing out IOUs like at some point Congress is going to authorize this? Don't worry, you'll get paid?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
My goodness.
So even when this financial burden was lifted, there was another 2 years of alteration and formation and command before 6 ships moved down from Norfolk to Hampton Roads. And then they were joined by the tenders Seagull and Flying Fish. And then Lieutenant Wilkes was given the final orders on August 18th at 1500. At that point, he weighed anchor and got underway.
So Congress had been wanting to do this since 1826, you said?
1828.
So it took them a decade to go from, hey, we would really like to do this, to casting off.
Yep.
Not because they needed to build a fleet to do this. I mean, one ship got recommissioned. But they just couldn't find the money?
Well, there was the money issues, command issues, formation issues. There was just a lot of issues that they had to hurl. I mean, it took 8 years just to get the funding. And once they got the funding, everything sped up, and 2 years later, they were ready to set sail.
I don't know what to say to that. It feels like if you want to do something, you should budget for it.
Dude, it's 2022, and nothing's changed.
I'm aware. I was biting my tongue about the harumph, runaway government spending harumph joke.
You're not better than it.
Oh, you know me so well.
So, August 18th, they weigh anchor, get underway, and it takes them until 0900 the next day to finally clear the harbor due to very light breezes.
Age of sail problems.
And then 2 hours later, they are finally in the open sea.
Well, it took 10 years. Let's get this journey underway.
So Commodore Jones, he was the first one to be given the command of this squadron. But it seems it took too long for him, so he resigned. And that's why Wilkes has it now. Another reason why Jones, and actually a number of other officers were offered this, decided not to do it is because 3 duties were laid down to officers who were only trained to fight ships. In addition to exploration, they were tasked with duties to survey newly found areas and to survey areas that have already been discovered but are not very known.
So, just to draw on the Star Trek reference again, the Congress didn't think to say, hey, we should have a couple science officers on these vessels, even if they may not be naval personnel. Some educated folks who have an expertise and knowledge in oceanography and what other studies they're hoping to do and perform.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because, yes, scientists were hired and brought along. Because, yes, no officers are really trained in surveying, and they don't have the experience and background of surveying. And, of course, that also means that they have no background in working with scientists. And as we all know, scientists are a little weird.
Oh, damn it, Captain. I'm a doctor, not an XO.
So these scientists were taken out of the United States Coast Survey. This is a civilian organization that, obviously, their main trade is surveying coasts. Wilkes went through and said, okay, all these guys have volunteered for it because there was a ton of people who volunteered to go out and do this. So he was like, I can't fit all of y'all on my boats. We're going to take 9 of you. And he also insisted that he and some of his other naval officers perform some of the scientific duties.
Why?
To broaden their knowledge.
Okay, that's fair.
And experience.
That's fair as long as he's deferring to the experts to take the lead on this and not just, okay, explain what tool I need to use. Okay. Now get out of the room. I don't want you tampering with my science.
But yeah, he wanted to get more experience with surveying and cartography. So the scientists included guys trained in naturalists, botanists, mineralogists, taxidermists, and philologists, and was carried by the sloop of war USS Vincennes, USS Peacock, USS Porpoise, which is a brig, the full rig ship Relief, which was a ship that they used for storage, the schooner Seagull, and Flying Fish, and these two served as tenders.
Now, perhaps times have changed. I thought taxidermy was more art than science.
Well, you also got to realize that back in this time, it was a very new thing to do, preserving bodies.
Yeah.
And so being able to learn about the bodies of animals, these are the only guys doing that.
So it's a field of biology in this time period that is experienced and practiced in actually opening up the remains of an animal and being able to see what makes it tick on the inside.
Yeah, these were carcass vets. So a side note, the Commodore George C. Reed, in command of the East Indian Squadron with the flagship USS Columbia, we're right now circumnavigating the globe and en route for the second Sumatran punitive expedition, which we will be getting to later. That's still coming up.
Okay.
So the expedition clears Cape Henry light at 0900 on the 19th, and Wilkes lays in a course for Rio de Janeiro.
Now, Cape Henry would be off the coast of Florida, right?
No, I don't believe
Okay.
so.
I was going to say, the only capes I'm familiar with are Good Hope and Horn.
Yeah, no, Cape Henry Lighthouse is Virginia Beach.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's in Virginia.
Oh, yes, back when it was just Virginia.
His first order was to survey certain Vigias that were reported, or shoals, at latitude 10 degrees south, between 18 degrees and 22 degrees west. And because of the winds of the season, they tacked east of the Atlantic. They then moved to the harbor of Funchili in the Madeira Islands on September 16th and did some repairs, and then moved southward and arrived October 7th at the Bay of Porto Praya in the Cape Verdes Islands, and then finally arrived at Rio de Janeiro on November 23rd. The entire voyage from the U.S. to Brazil took 95 days.
That feels like a lot longer than it should have.
It's about twice the time normally used for a vessel that was going straight there. But they're also surveying. Remember, this is a scientific expedition.
Yes, but it's a scientific expedition to survey the Pacific? We're in the Caribbean. I feel like that's been pretty thoroughly documented by the British and Spanish at this point.
There's still stuff that you can explore on the way out there.
But they weren't supposed to be surveying the Caribbean. Congress said the Pacific. I mean, I guess if the officers wanted to get some practice in with stuff that was already fairly well known so that the scientist on board could just check their work and be like, okay, yep, you did good, or no, the island is not shaped like a penis. Stop doing that, please. It was funny the first time. The 12th time, not so much.
Well, I'll tell you what. Scientist listeners, will you please write Stephen and explain to him why it is okay to do some exploring on the way to where you're going to be exploring?
Yes, please, educate me.
So, the Peacock needed repairs while they were at Rio de Janeiro. So they did not leave until January 6th. Now, from there, they moved south to Buenos Aires, and at the mouth of the Rio Negro, they passed a French naval blockade of Argentina's seaports. The European powers at this time were going to the aid of Brazil, and they were involved in the internal affairs of the Argentine Republic. Now, the Americans had reduced their military profile prior to departing from the U.S., so they were not molested by the French.
So, when you say reducing their military profile, do you mean they discarded most of their cannons at port before leaving, or?
They looked more like merchant/scientific ships than military vessels.
Okay. So, at a quick glance, you would probably assume it's just a trade expedition rather than a, naval scientific survey.
Yeah. So they then went to Tierra del Fuego, Chile, and they went to Peru. The Seagull and its crew of 15 were lost during a storm right off the coast of South America in May.
Now, what were they carrying? I forget.
The Seagull was a tender.
Okay.
So from there, they visited the Tuamotu Archipelago. Then they went to Samoa and New South Wales in Australia. So, Britain's jail. And in December, they went from Sydney into the Antarctic Ocean, where they reported the discovery of, quote, an Antarctic continent west of the Balleny Islands.
Wait a second. Nobody at this point had seen Antarctica and thought to brought it up.
Maybe not this part of it.
Oh, so they're thinking it might be they're not realizing Antarctica's one big landmass.
Right. I mean, there's not many people have explored Antarctica up to this point. It was very hard to get to, and we had no aerial photography at this point.
And it's not exactly a good place to be circumnavigating around. I mean, it's terrible, terrible place to be, really, even today.
Inhospitable. Yeah, lots of frozen bodies. So this part of Antarctica was later named Wilkes Land. Now, at this point, there are discrepancies in the logs of various ships of his expedition, which suggests that they might have actually just been altered. So something might have happened here, because there is a controversy between the expedition of who saw Ice Island, 175 kilometers from the coast on January 16th, and then the coast itself on the 25th. A French expedition captained by Jules Dumont d'Urville saw the coast about 400 kilometers westward on January 20th and disembarked on the islet of Giolugi Archipelago, which is 4 kilometers from the mainland. So
someone may be taking credit for somebody else's discovery, if I'm understanding you correct?
Sounds like.
Huh.
Or it could be that they're misinterpreting icebergs as land masses.
I mean, that far south, or if you go far enough north, absolutely. Icebergs can look like an ice shelf off a landmass for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they did say Ice Island. So we can only guess at what they were meaning at this point in time.
Well, and I remember a few years back, there was a big break-off from an ice shelf in Antarctica about the size of Manhattan Island or something. So if they were seeing something like that was just kind of floating around the very South Pacific, they couldn't be blamed for thinking it was Antarctica.
Yeah. So to add on to the controversy, the commander of the USS Porpoise, Lieutenant Caldwalder, they saw the Jules Dumont expedition and deliberately avoided contact with them.
Okay, but why? Did the journals not go into why?
More than likely, it's to try to keep the controversy going to try to be saying, hey, we're the ones that discovered it first. You French guys, back off. But they did take mineral, algae, and animal samples while they were there.
Okay.
So, fun fact, in February of 1840, some of the expedition were present at the initial signing of the Treaty of Waitangi in New Zealand.
I can't say I'm familiar with that treaty. What does it do?
It is between the representatives of the British Crown and Maori chiefs from the North Island of New Zealand. It is a document of political constitution of the state of New Zealand and is highly significant in framing the political relations between New Zealand's government and the Maori population.
Oh, okay.
The Crown wanted the island as a colony, and this was their effort in trying to do it peacefully. But that's not U.S. history, so that's as far as we're getting into it. So the expedition then visits Fiji, and in July, 2 members of the party, a Lieutenant Underwood and Wilkes' nephew, Midshipman Wilkes Henry, were killed when they were trying to barter for food in western Fiji on the Malolo Island.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the cause of this event remains cloudy. Immediately prior to the deaths, the son of the local chief, who was being held hostage by the Americans, escaped by jumping out of the boat and running through the shallow water for shore. So, of course, they're losing their prisoners, so the Americans fire over his head. Now, according to members of the expedition party on the boat, his escape was intended as a prearranged signal by the Fijians to attack them. And according to those on shore, the shooting is what caused the attack.
So, do we know why this kid was held hostage? Like, was this just a good old-fashioned, we're going to give you a VIP of ours, you give us a VIP of yours just to ensure everybody's on the, straight and narrow and we don't start any attacks? Or did they just catch this kid doing something they considered suspicious? And I say kid, he could have been in his 20s or 30s. The chief may have been, a little gray in the beard at this point. I don't know.
Yeah. More than likely, it was just as a bargaining chip. I don't have the information on why.
We don't have the logs detailing that. Okay.
But we have that the Americans landed 60 sailors to attack the, quote, hostile natives. We put that in quote because we know our history.
Yeah.
And close to 80 of the Fijians were killed in the reprisal that the Americans did while burning 2 villages to the ground.
Yay.
You shouldn't cheer that.
Oh, hence the very unenthusiastic. And there was much rejoicing. Guys, this is supposed to be a scientific research expedition, not, a trigger-happy romp through the South Pacific.
At this point in time, for any country, it's one and the same.
I know, and I know we have, 100, almost 200, honestly, years of hindsight to try and improve ourselves, but come on, guys. Come on.
So let's move to 1841. They are now exploring the west coast of South America and North America, which includes the Strait of Juan de Fuca, Puget Sound, and the Columbia River. So, after Fiji, they go to Hull Island, which is later known as Orona. And then they also go to the Hawaiian Islands, my hometown.
Now, is this America's first contact with Hawaii? Like, as far as, official representatives of the government? I'm sure there have been plenty of traders at this point.
I don't believe so. So James Cook, of course, is the first European to discover Hawaii, and that was 1778.
Right, right. I was just wondering,
So,
like, if the United States government had any sort of, you know, hello, I'm here on behalf of the government of the United States of America. How are you, monarch of Hawaii? Or if this was the first time that the United States had any official representative meeting with folks from the islands. Like, I was going to say, I know the highlights are like around the 1850s is when, you know, we really started encroaching, and then it was the 1870s or 1880s that it became a vassal state effectively due to business interest.
yeah. I mean, it was a bloodless coup, but
A coup is a coup.
yeah. Well, suffice to say that about 60 years after this expedition is when the U.S. overthrew the monarchy there and it became a territory. So, Wilkes spends a good time near Bainbridge Island, and he notes that a bird-like shape of the harbor at Winslow, and so he named it Eagle Harbor, which continues his fascination with bird names. He named Bill Point and Wing Point. Port Madison and Points Monroe and Jefferson were named in honor of former U.S. presidents. Port Ludlow was assigned to the honor Lieutenant Augustus Ludlow, who died during the War of 1812. So in April, the Peacock, your boat, was commanded by Lieutenant William L. Hudson.
Oh no, it's my boat now, thank you.
And the Flying Fish, they both surveyed Drummond's Island, which was named for one of the Americans on the expedition. Now, Lieutenant Hudson heard from a member of his crew that a ship had wrecked off of the island, and that the crew of that ship was massacred by Gilbertese. It's said that only a woman and her child were the survivors. So Hudson, being the brave American that he is, decides to land a force of Marines and sailors to search the island. Now, initially, the natives were peaceful, and his men were able to explore the island. But when they were returning to their ship, Hudson noticed a member of his crew was missing. So they searched the island again. They did not find the man and saw that the natives started arming themselves.
So, rather than the sensible, well, this is a tropical island. We are not familiar with all the wildlife in the area. And we're not familiar with the terrain. It's quite possible, he was grabbed by an animal and eaten, or, fell off a cliff or something. No, the natives must have done it. And they're arming themselves. It couldn't possibly be because we're making them nervous by, staying here longer than we said we would be with an armed force. No, they must be feeling guilty.
Well, remember the original reason that they're there in the first place. Ship was massacred by these people. Apparently. Allegedly, yes. So he returns to the ship and talks with Hudson. And Hudson orders him to return to shore and demand the return of the sailor. So I don't know if I said the guy's name before, but Walker, he's the shore party guy, then went back to shore with his landing party and demanded that the natives return his sailor. And then the natives charge, forcing them back into their dinghies, and they row back to the ship.
So Walker, Navy Ranger, is not the martial arts powerhouse that his name would suggest.
No. If he was, the natives would be very afraid and would not mess with him at all.
With a single roundhouse kick, he could have made that island reconnect with the mainland.
Yes. So the next day, the Americans decide that they are going to bombard the island and then land ashore again.
Jeez, that's not bringing a gun to a knife fight. That's bringing artillery to a knife fight.
So they find about 700 warriors opposing them. But of course, they really had no chance. Artillery, muskets versus spears. No Americans were hurt. 12 natives were killed. Unknown number of wounded. And 2 villages destroyed.
This expedition really likes going for the double special with the villages.
Mm-hmm. And these 2 boats did that at the island of Upolu, Samoa, as well, because of the death of a American merchant sailor, allegedly.
You know, I'm beginning to think that the gunnery crews were just getting bored and looking for excuses.
So, July 1841, the Peacock was lost
No! Not again!
on the Columbia River, though they suffered no loss of life because a man named John Dean rescued them by canoe. They were also rescued by an African-American servant of the Vincennes pursuer and a group of Chinook Indians. Dean also rescues the expedition's artist, Alfred Agate, with his paintings and drawings. He saved the art.
Good man.
So when Wilkes hears that the Peacock has been foundered, he stops working in San Juan and sails south and never comes back.
I'm sure the natives are more than happy about that.
He's so heartbroken that he never goes back to Puget Sound. So from modern day Portland, Oregon, a shore party led by George F. Emmons was directed to go via an inland route to San Francisco Bay. So his party travels south along the Siskiyou Trail, which includes the Sacramento River, making this the first official recorded visit by Americans to Mount Shasta in Northern California.
I'm just thinking, is there a nice and easy natural path between, Portland to the Bay Area?
Not at this time.
That's what I'm saying. Like, nowadays you have interstates, but I'm pretty sure there's more than a few mountains and not a convenient river connecting those two.
Backpacking, dude. It's not easy.
That's why you and I let the ship carry us.
We'll get you up some mountain passes here soon.
Oh no.
PRT's coming up.
Oh no.
So they rejoined the ships in San Francisco Bay. They pretty much got dropped off there. The ships went, bye, and set sail south. And they went by foot. At this point, they survey San Francisco and its tributaries and produces a map of Upper California. They then head back out into the Pacific to visit Wake Island in 1841 and returned by way of the Philippines, the Sulu Archipelago, Borneo, Singapore, Polynesia, and the Cape of Good Hope. And then coming back to New York on June 10th, 1842. Now, as you can imagine, Wilkins did not have a good relationship with his officers because of his self-proclaimed status as captain and commodore, because he was the only one to volunteer for the job.
Right, you have a junior officer who, because no one else wants it, who has now appointed himself to be CEO of a lot of people that, in a military sense, outrank him in years and actual rank.
Yeah, because he had the captain's uniform on, he had his pennant on, and he was a lieutenant.
Oh, buddy.
So this ticked off people of
Actual captain rank.
similar rank, yeah, or better rank. And of course, he's a little lieutenant. So the power goes to his head a bit and he mistreats many of his subordinates.
Which,
And
in many cases, are actually his seniors.
Yeah, and enjoyed punishments such as flogging.
Oh, no!
And this, of course, resulted in controversy when he got back to the U.S. He was court-martialed, but was acquitted on all charges except of illegally punishing men in his squadron. So he was attached to the Coast Survey from 1844 to 1861. He was engaged in preparing the report of the expedition. So it took another 20 years for the report. 28 volumes were planned. 19 of them were published.
That's a lot of notes.
Yeah. He personally wrote the narrative of 1845 and the volumes Hydrography and Meteorology of 1851. The narrative contains material concerning the manners and customs of political and economic conditions in a number of places that were little known. And he did contributions in reports from James Dwight Donna on zoophonites in the geology book and the Krustaka book, and a number of little articles and reports. He also published the Western America works, which included California and Oregon, and the Theory of the Winds. And this is all digitalized at the Smithsonian. So this expedition actually played a major role in the development of 19th century science, particularly with the growth of the American scientific establishment. Many of the species and items found by the expedition helped them form the basis of a lot of the Smithsonian's collections. So here's a question for you. What do you think the Navy sailors called the scientists?
All right, let's see. 19th century, relatively uneducated by that time period in regards to academics. Probably didn't think too kindly of these guys because they were just, from their perspective, consuming supplies and not actually contributing to the ship. Shipwives?
No. They were called clam diggers or bug catchers. Not bad.
That's actually a lot. I like that.
Yeah, it's not bad.
I mean, if somebody called me a bug catcher or a clam digger and I was a scientist, yes, I am. Thank you for noticing.
So these bug catchers explore 280 islands.
Wow.
During this time, mainly in the Pacific.
So, roughly a 4-year journey. Of that 4 years, maybe 2 and change are in the Pacific. That's almost an island every 3 or 4 days.
Well, they're also explored and mapped 800 miles of Oregon. They cataloged 60,000 plant and bird specimens.
Holy crap, they were busy.
Yes. They collected 648 species of seeds. 254 live plants were collected, which later these were put into the Botanic Garden. So yeah, this was a very important scientific expedition done by the U.S. Navy.
Had a few, not so great spots over the course of its expedition, but yeah, that's a good final result.
Yeah, only 92 natives lost their lives.
That's actually a little bit of self-restraint for the folks at this time. Not that that's a good number. The good number would be 0, but...
And we lost 30 men and 2 ships.
Peacock. I'll never forget you.
So that is the expedition. How you feeling?
I'm feeling like, seeking out new life, accomplished. New civilizations, they could have done better.
Well, they sought them out. They just didn't treat them right.
Yes. but I feel like the treating them right is kind of implied.
Not during this time.
Not during this
Remember-
time. That's
They're all racist bastards.
yes.
Every single one of them.
I also learned the importance of not going mad with power if I put on my captain's uniform while you're sleeping.
Wait, you have a captain's uniform?
No. No. I borrow yours.
No wonder it's stretched out.
Well, that's just hurtful.
Do you at least clean it afterwards?
I spray it with body spray. That's good enough.
All right, I gotta get new locks. All right, guys. On that note, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. You can reach us at US Navy History Podcast at gmail.com, or you can tweet at us at USN History Pod. Steven. It's Captain's Vast time.
Well, before we sign off, if you guys would be so kind as to write a review, we know you're listening. We can see the numbers. Stop hiding. Tell us what you think, what we can improve upon. The more stars, the better, but we appreciate your honesty. And if you'd like, we can even read your review on the air. With that, we wish you fair winds and following seas. See you next week.
US Naval History Podcast. Departing.